Is this deja vu of 2008 where the housing market tanks 60%? Keep watching this video, we're going to dive into it. Hey everybody, Christina Ingram here with Keller Williams Realty Las Vegas of the Ingram Group, and also with Dustin DeHart. And we're here to talk about, because we're having this conversation over and over and over on, is this the same crash as the housing market? I'm finding I'm having these conversations with people and I'm trying to explain the differences. So I think it's important that we have a discussion on what caused the crash of 2008, because I know all of us lived it, but most people don't understand what was the root cause of 2008, actually 2007, 2008 crash.
Yeah, well, the root cause was toxic mortgages, right? I mean,
Right.
as simple as that. And a lot of overbuilding as well from builders. We just had too much household supply for the household formations and the population growth at that time. And, we've never really caught up. But the toxic mortgages are really what created it, right? So loose credit happened in, 2005, the subprime world kind of came to fruition, right? And then it just kept going. Wall Street figured, wow, we can make a lot of money off of this, right? And they created all of these crazy programs and we're making tons of money. They even had the ratings agencies were claiming this was all AAA and everything was fine, right? But when you look back, it was crazy the amount of people that were getting into properties, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like when you're talking to a bartender that owns 10 properties, right? Something's wrong. Or a stripper, right? Something's off. I mean, I started in the industry in 2007, so I kind of caught the end of it, and like there were, Countrywide, for example, had a product called Fast and Easy, because it literally was that, right? You didn't need any money down, right? Didn't have to show me bank statements.
Could be a day out of bankruptcy.
This was, they had to have a little bit of okay credit score of this one, but income, we don't need to prove that. And then when I run the file, I'm like, oh, you don't even need an appraisal, you're good, right? I mean, that's how crazy it was. I mean, there was even products where you would not even pay the interest, you would pay deferred interest, so your mortgage balance was going up every month, right? And, there were very smart people, even the Federal Reserve chairman back then, that kept saying, oh, property values will just go up, right? Well, we know they didn't, because these loans blew up, right? And, when you're putting no money down and now you're adjusting into a fully indexed payment when you were paying interest only, well, you're gonna let that house go, right? So we had a foreclosure crisis. Now here we are today, and those loan products don't exist anymore. We all know that, right? So, the paper that's underwritten now is some of the strictest it's ever been. You have to show income. I mean, at the end of the day, the bank wants to know that you can afford the house, right? And, unless you're a veteran or USDA loan, you're going to put some money down for a down payment. So, so that's, really what caused the crash back in the day, right? And there was a lot of differences back then that are now, right? Unemployment, for instance, was, 9.6% in 2009. We're at the lowest we've been since 1969.
Right, and it's funny how when you listen, they're like, oh, they're disappointed because of the strong growth in the job market, and you're like, disappointed?
Well, we're disappointed because rates don't like that, because and we
because they're talking about inflation,
right? And that we could do a whole segment on that jobs report, because that thing was off. But so and then you look at other differences again back then. Real estate's all about supply and demand, right? I mean, let's face it.
Typically, yes.
You know what I mean? And back then, there was a lot more supply. I mean, I know supply shot up, when rates did as well, but they're coming down. It's coming down a little bit month over month.
The rate's correct.
So demand isn't where we normally would like to see it. It's certainly down.
There is an uptick in mortgage applications, which is a key indicator that we might see more buyers jumping back in.
Yeah, and we are, and it's what's happening. What happened right now is because interest rates shot up,
Mhm.
right? And they went up quicker than they ever have, and the most they ever have in the history of tracking interest rates, right? But they hit their peak in November, and they were in that 7.5% range.
Right.
And there were a lot of smart people, including Gary Keller, that was saying they're going to go to 9 or 10%. We're not, right? And
Hopefully.
Well, hopefully,
I mean,
right?
we still don't know.
We don't,
Right.
yes. But all indicators are
showing
they're not.
that it's not.
Right. Because at the end of the day, the reason they went up is because of inflation, right?
Mhm.
So in November, we got a much better than expected inflation report, and that shot rates down. In fact, before that jobs report came out, the day before, we actually dipped under the 6% range.
Wow.
And we only did it one day, right? And then the jobs report came out, and rates, they've been steadily going up a little bit, right? But look, rates don't go up and down in a straight line, right?
Right.
There are going to be some peaks and valleys, and they're going to start coming down again. Now, in May, Christina, there's going to be another inflation report,
Okay.
and it's expected to replace a shelter cost. It's really been dragging up inflation because it's been so elevated, and when that replaces the year-over-year shelter cost, it really should drive rates down even more, and in all likelihood will be in that 5% range across the board for almost all mortgages. And that will certainly get a lot more buyers out of hibernation. But like as we just said, buyers are coming out of hibernation now. You know what I mean? Like, I'm feeling it. Our applications are way up. We're starting to get phone calls from listing agents again, right? Gosh, a month or 2 or 3, 4 months ago, you put an offer and you're getting accepted, right? Now I'm getting those calls like, have they been through underwriting? Do they really need closing costs? Because we're in a multiple offer situation. And that's what I'm hearing, right?
Right. So let's take this back again because you said you got into it 2007. So when it started to crash, basically. So you got the tail end.
Yeah.
So I got my license in 2006. So I had a year of like just selling, and then it started to slow down. And I remember in 2007, I was working a condo conversion project, and we had 12 escrows, and I want to say this was right around March.
Okay.
March or April, one of those 2 months. It was the beginning of the year, first quarter, and we had all ready to close on a Monday, about 12.
Yeah.
And they were funded on that Friday, and they were ready to close on Monday. Monday morning, about right before noon, we got a call that the bank pulled all the wires for all 12.
Yeah.
So all 12 that were supposed to close did not close. And we were like,
yeah. Yeah, I mean,
literally that bank went out in a day. It was a subprime bank, and they were doing the option arm mortgages.
Sure, right.
So, again, to touch on what was the difference between then and now. Then we had so many different, I think, mortgage products that people could get if they had a pulse.
Sure.
There were some day out of bankruptcy. There were investment products that they could get with no money down and get cash back at close. There was a ton of those, and that's where the straw buyers came from.
Sure.
And because people were just like putting their dog on an application and collecting the $30,000 back from the dog for the dog, and then not make the first payment, but walked away with 30 grand and then just tanked then it took a year basically for the bank to take back that particular house, maybe or longer on some of them.
Yeah.
So I think that had a lot to do with it. I mean, that movie, what is it called? Get Short. That is a good one to watch to really understand what that time period was like. And if you were in the industry, you have severe PTSD from that time.
Yes.
I know I do. Because when 2020 happened and they started changing all the different guidelines again, I was like, this is like 2008, 9 all over again. I'm like, I'm getting PTSD. I'm like, what's going on? But then all of a sudden, everything started to take off. So I think because 2008, the the Fed, basically the government, put in certain things in place to not allow mortgages get to that level again either.
Right.
So
Yes. So I mean, it was big legislation,
Mhm.
right? So, and CFPB was created. All of that. There's rules on appraisals now. There's something that's now called qualified mortgages, where you have to meet certain debt to income ratios. You have to prove income.
because don't they
Yeah.
buy back that the paper on the stock market, the federal government, or how does that work?
Well, so it's sold through Fannie and Freddie. So
Okay.
we're under government conservatorship still. But the Fed has been, since the market did crash, have been buying a lot of mortgage-backed securities and yields, and that's what kept rates low, right? And they can't do that forever, and that's one of the other reasons why rates have gone up, right? We can't just keep printing money, which,
Right.
And then look, rates were heading in this direction, the
Mhm.
fours and fives before COVID. And then COVID hit and changed everything, right? Because literally then rates went up to 7% overnight, right?
Mhm.
And then everybody's out of a job. So the Federal Reserve doubled down and basically bought everything and drove the rates down, like we know, under 3%, which
Mhm.
we'll never see again unless there's another COVID or some
Right.
major catastrophe that will certainly supersede any lower interest rates in our country. So that's, look, when people get really hung up on it, rates are high. Yes, they're higher compared to the decade of being under, inflated low because of the federal government, right? This is where they're supposed to be. So if we can get rates back into the fives, which I expect very soon, God willing, maybe we're talking about high fours by the end of the year. That's a really low rate environment right now,
Right.
and then, we'll talk later about some of the advantages, but with housing prices coming down a little bit for people, with that higher rate, it kind of equals out sometimes right now,
Right. Right.
But yeah, there's a ton of stuff from back then that we don't see right now.
Right.
I mean,
So,
almost every dynamic.
So when the subprime market was obviously the first one to go, with the adjustable rate mortgages, a lot of people were on adjustable rate mortgages where they were qualifying for the lower payment and not the higher payment.
Right.
And then when it adjusted up, they
Yeah.
couldn't afford the payment. So that was a big thing. And then also when the subprime pretty much went completely out, and values started to drop so much because it was such a big chunk of the market of people getting home ownership that would have never had home ownership if it wasn't for the subprime
Sure.
market.
Yeah.
Then the A-paper buyers were like, you know what?
Yeah.
It's not worth it for me to keep paying when I could let this go. Because
Right.
I'm going to have to hold on this, because their plan was hold on it for 5 years and then go buy something else. But they couldn't do that because it wasn't going to be back to
Right.
a level where they would make some money for probably another 7 to 10 years.
Sure.
So they're like, why should we have to keep
Right.
it? Let's just let that go. So they would let it go. They would either short sale or let it go to foreclosure. And then in 3 years, they're able to buy again,
Yeah.
which
Yeah,
was a
we-
lot faster than the 10-year plan
Sure.
when they originally had a 5-year plan.
Yeah.
So then when the A-paper started doing that, it really started to drag the market down. So you had two factors going into it. And then, I don't think we're seeing that right now.
No, of course not. That created a ton of supply as well, right? And like buyers back then, remember, like wasn't a lot of people buying a house back then, right? The federal government then created a tax incentive for first-time home buyers,
Yes,
right?
that really helped.
That helped, but that was short-lived. But yeah, the normal, cash investors and A-paper buyers or trade-up buyers and all that, they were gone, right? I mean, who's gonna buy a house right now in the middle of all this, right?
Correct.
It
was because your market was like 3 to 5 years for someone to get back into the game. So we were seeing newer buyers, people who had never been able to buy before, but kept their credit good.
Yep.
And because housing prices crashed so much that they were able to get into these houses for $150,000 that were selling for $400,000 before. So that was really a different time, and I guess we'll start getting into the changes here in just a second.
Yeah, look, and I don't claim to be the smartest guy in the world. Is it, are we going to crash? I don't think so. But I'll tell you this, Zillow, who interviews 150 of the top economists in the country every year, their report came out last week, and the estimates are the next 5 years for 23% appreciation, right?
Oh, shit.
So
So
you
that's
buy
normal. That's normal.
yeah, that's normal.
That's 4 to 5%
right.
appreciation.
That's what
a
you're
year,
supposed to do,
Yeah.
right? And what's and so if you buy a $500,000 house today, you can expect to make about 115 grand, according to some of the smartest people in the planet that do this for a living, right? So look. And that 4 or 5%, that always seems to work out, right? Doesn't it? Even when we had that big crash, right? We started to go up, and even when we went way up because of COVID, right? And we came back down, we're leveling out. We always kind of end at that 4 to 5%. So, it really is all the indicators right now, or it's still a good time to buy. Rates did go up. They're coming down. There's a lot of advantages for people right now in this market, and you can always refinance.
We're going to get into part 2, which you'll see next week, about how this market is different than the 2008 market. But I hope that gave you a good idea of why 2008 happened. And then we're going to go point out the differences. So if you do like our videos, please hit like and subscribe and hit the bell so you can be notified anytime that we do our videos. And he's got his own YouTube channel too. Make sure you hit like and subscribe and follow him as well. And this is Christina and Dustin, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Thanks, guys.